Okay, now after all that excitement, we resume the meeting with our regular agenda. And the first item is oral communications for items that are not already on the agenda. And we are honored to have with us this evening the Mayor of Millbrae, Gina Pappin, who would like to address us.
Thank you and congratulations, Mayor Miller, Vice Mayor, or Mayor Pro Tem, as you say.
Yeah, right.
And all the council
We're not
members.
in favor of vice.
There you go. I know. I was a vice for a year. There you go. You guys are a tough act to follow. My congratulations for a past year that sounded extremely successful and moving forward. It sounds like you guys have some wonderful plans ahead. And as I mentioned to Cliff, we have some great sustainability in Millbrae. We are gladly share our information with you as well. It's all about sharing here. I am here since the candidate pool has shrunk greatly as your colleague has dropped out of the MTC race, I'm here to respectfully ask your support for my candidacy in that position. I promise to be a passionate and committed advocate for all of the cities in San Mateo County. This position is extremely important. They handle $4.6 billion in funding throughout the 9 Bay Area counties, covering 101 different municipalities. So we all have a huge investment in this, and we need strong representation. We need representation so that we can get our fair share of the funding. Some of the funding that was recently put out, Alameda County got $63 million, San Francisco got $38 million, and San Mateo County only got $26 million. We deserve more. And that right now, I understand they're trying to alter the funding application so that we would be at a greater disadvantage. Those who know me know that I am a strong advocate, and I will fight for our fair share, reducing the congestion that we have now. There's a lot of technology out there for those who have their iPhones or don't have their iPhones, but being alert as to what's happening and keeping commuters informed is key. Also, keeping our transportation system coordinated is a big part of what's happening here. If you're going to take BART or you're going to take Caltrain or you're going to take the bus, we need the systems coordinated. We need one ticket to get on all of those, so you're not fondling for money and trying to find things. Modernization of Caltran, the money has been set aside. We need to ensure that the right-of-way stays where it is, that it's acceptable and has a minimum impact on all of our cities. Now, I've been an advocate for a long time, and I've sat down and listened to. I know that they've tried to shove things down all of our throats. They want your yard here as a yard for changing and corp yard for the train system. And that's too valuable. You can't just come in and say, we're taking this. You guys have some great plans ahead. I will fight for that, and I will fight to keep you informed. That's what's key here. We all have to come together, and we have to be informed because we're a stronger unit in that way. This is about north-south, east-west connections, big cities and little cities. It's all important. You need to have a representative that's going to be there for you, that's going to tell you what's happening, what do you need, listen to you, and then take it up there and fight for what our rights are. I have served on the San Mateo County Council of Cities, CCAG Legislative Committee, Congestion Management Program, HART, Grand Boulevard, a whole list of things that I sent out in a letter to you. So I'm not going to repeat them. You guys are very busy. I serve as a Deputy Attorney General for the state of California. I have done so for the last 17 years. I was also the Deputy Director of a state agency where I managed $400 million budget and 150 employees. So I am big into building relationships. The city of Brisbane and the city of Millbrae, we once shared a police chief. We are partnering now with 4 different cities to merge our fire department. Relationships are key. I work with the Silicon Valley Leadership Group. I just left a dinner that Cliff was giving me a hard time about how could I leave with Mayor Lee, trying to reach out to people in San Mateo County. My prime rib is in the car, so there's. I left with the doggy bag.
You got something.
That's true. So I would love to have your support on this. There is an issue out there that your pro tem will mention. This is a 4-year position, whether you're elected or not. There's precedent that people have served. I mention this because
What do you mean whether you're elected or not?
I am termed out next year, so I would hold the position for the full 4 years. This has been done before. In the city of Millbrae, term limits are
Sue
not.
Lemper did that, didn't she?
Yes, she did.
Right.
And term limits are not lifetime in Millbrae. You have to be out for 2 years and you can come right back. So I intend to be a strong representative for the full period of time. Your pro tem, again, will probably mention here that certain cities have a lock on some of these transportation committees. Millbrae is the intermodal center of San Mateo County, which means everything stops in Millbrae. The train, the BART, the Samtrans, the connection to the airport. So we have a vested interest in what happens to everyone around us. And we need to work as a team. And that's what I bring to this position. So I'd be happy to answer any questions, but I don't want to take your time.
Mr. Mayor, if I allow
Can I
me.
just add one factual thing?
Certainly.
The Council of the Cities Selection Committee will be taking this up again, but I don't know when that's scheduled.
January.
January when, though?
End of January, January
January.
29th, yes.
Okay, so we have enough,
Yes,
we could put it on the next agenda?
yes, yes.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
Okay.
And if you need anything else answered, I'll probably be sending out
Yeah,
another
our next
letter.
meeting is January 14th,
Okay,
right?
we'll go from there.
I got it right? Okay.
Pretty good.
Yeah. If you allow me, I'd like to
Sure,
make it, yeah. It was an interesting night. There were 6 people running for one, 5 people running for one seat. And by far, we have 2 very qualified candidates. The rest were just coming in as a newcomer and so forth, and it muddied up the whole process. We had directed our mayor to vote for the first time for himself because he's our candidate. Then the second time, if he doesn't have the votes, which he had two votes, to back out. And the more people back out, the more the votes are distributed to strong candidates, which, in my opinion, right now, the 2 strong candidates are truly Gina and Jerry Deal. Roseanne, what do you call it?
Alicia.
Alicia from Redwood City running for MTC.
Well, shouldn't we have this conversation
Right.
on the 14th?
We can, but I was just going to say that I've worked with her, and her strengths in transportation can definitely be an asset,
well,
and we can talk about
We'll
that.
take
at
that
the-
all into account because we certainly will agendize it and we really appreciate your
Great,
coming.
and we appreciate
Now
the
we-
democratic process and everybody being involved. I thank you very much for this opportunity. I look forward to working with you and for you.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
See you, Gina.
I have
Thanks.
a couple other people who've requested oral communications. I did want to mention that there was a representative from Senator Hill who was here earlier.
She left.
No, she left, but I did want to
Yes.
point out that
Oh, okay.
Senator Hill's office was represented during our celebration. Yeah. So I thought that was nice. And I have 2 slips for oral communication. One is Karen Cunningham.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, City Council. The reason I'm speaking this evening is something completely different to anything else that's on the agenda this evening. It is relative to our feral cat population in Brisbane. And I did send an email to you about a month or so ago relative to a presentation that was made privately by some organizations that are interested in helping this issue. Our police department have been working diligently with the citizens who are interested in working on this problem, but it is a pretty serious problem that is not going to get any better unless the people of Brisbane and the surrounding areas are educated on how to fix the problem. I mean, some of the issues are, not feeding cats at night, et cetera, et cetera. It goes on and on and on. How to trap a feral cat, what do we do? How do we reduce the feral cat population? What does that mean in terms of numbers? And I was hoping to have Dr. Monica Rodico with me tonight, but she had an emergency at Nine Lives Foundation, and she was obviously doing her job, rescuing animals and doing what she needed to do. But they actually have statistics on if you trap, spay, neuter, release, what that actually does to the population in a pretty short period of time relative to reducing the feral cat population. It's not just about the feral cat population. This is about what happens on the mountain. With the animals who are on the mountain who are being killed by the feral cats who are in the area. It happens to about what happens to the domestic cats who are then being killed by the coyotes and the other animals, all the animals that are on the mountain. If you look at some of the animals that are in Brisbane who are the wild animals, they're twice the size of other animals that are in the area. So my request tonight is that we can table for maybe in the end of January, that we bring these experts forth to have a conversation with the City Council as to how to educate the people of Brisbane, how to help teach people to trap the animals, what this all means, what it means to the population, what it means to keeping diseases down on the mountain, the animals on the mountain, what it means to their survival, and our domestic cat population, our domestic animal population. As you've all heard, so many of our domestic kitties are disappearing, and this is, coyotes, this is all kinds of other animals. So if we could put that on the agenda, I would be most grateful that we bring some of these experts in to just give their opinion. We show people how to trap. Obviously, that's not going to be in one presentation, but we could have a conversation about, we could have a trapping class, and I would be happy to be part of that as a citizen representative to show people how to trap an animal. The county has offered vouchers to help pay for that, and if we have people who are willing to assist who can't afford to pay for the additional out-of-pocket expenses, that we would figure out how to make that happen as well. So it is my request that we put this on the agenda for sometime early next year, please.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
It's my understanding that the Open Space and Ecology Committee has been dealing with this issue as well. Is that correct? Yeah, I'm asking the staff person who deals with that committee.
There was a conversation about feral cats after the feral cat meeting was held at City Hall.
Right.
The Open Space and Ecology Committee is looking to probably put an article into an upcoming City Star or City News, and I think they are supportive of trying to find somebody who would volunteer to help coordinate the capturing and spaying and neutering of feral cats. And I think that's really the question: is there somebody in Brisbane who's willing to be the contact for that? And I think the Open Space and Ecology Committee, recognized how busy they are, and there was no one on the Open Space and Ecology Committee who has the time, but they recognize that there is that need because feral cats do have an impact on the overall environment. There's a number of issues that they create. We have a couple of members from the Open Space and Ecology Committee who are here if you want to ask them any more information.
Yeah, well, I was just wondering whether, they would want to, bring some recommendations to the council, and then we'd have an agenda item with not only information, but also maybe some suggestions as to, what we might be able to do.
I have a suggestion.
Yeah, okay.
Too. And Chief Macias, the put you on the spot. We have a contract with the Peninsula Humane Society, and how does that work? And is there something that maybe we can get some information from them on in regards to feral cats? And
Yes, we do. Sure, we can get as much information that we'd like and distribute that out as well. Yes. I don't know exactly. I know that they will, I don't know exactly what their policies are in regarding accepting feral cats, but I think there still is a cost that it's incurred by those individuals bringing the cats down. And I know some of these organizations that came and spoke that evening did provide some free vouchers to pay for some of that cost.
okay.
Yeah. Barbara, did you want to respond, or no?
We're working on it.
Yeah, okay. I'm just thinking about what the, most efficient way to deal with the issue is, but Karen?
Unfortunately, the problem in San Mateo County is at such a critical juncture that although we love the Peninsula Humane Society, if you take a cat there right now, it's dead within a very short period of
Euthanized,
time.
yeah.
Yeah. So some of the other organizations have a no-kill policy. For us animal lovers, that's obviously a much nicer way of thinking about things. They do have a very strong outreach for adoption policies, and I do understand that, the feral cats can be a horrible problem for the wildlife and for everything else in every community. But having as many different people who have alternative ideas as possible is great. Peninsula Humane Society has a very limited budget, like everything else in the county. And if you take a young kitten in there right now, it's not alive for more than about 6 hours, and that's the sad truth. And if anybody tells you any different, they can come argue with me. So anything we can do to and honestly, when you look at the matrix of spay, neuter, release, reduce the population, educate people, not feeding cats at nighttime. And if you're going to feed cats, this is how you do it. This is what you do, this is what you not do. The numbers that they have on a national grid are actually pretty impressive of how that actually reduces the cat population, the killing of the native flora and fauna, et cetera, et cetera. So if we can at least bring this to the table, I think we will have some great.
Okay, yeah, no, I think,
Karen,
go ahead.
if you may, have you been to an Open Space and Ecology Committee meeting and expressed
No, I have not.
this to them?
This actually came, I'm not sure how this actually ended up in my lap, but I did go out and buy a trap that I have donated to the city. We have informally involved a few other citizens whose names I will not speak publicly, but they have said they would be involved with regards to teaching and training people how to trap an animal safely. Not like I ended up in the emergency room for being completely ignorant about how to trap an animal. So there are some of us who are very interested in the humane aspect of it, the ecological aspect of it, etc. And yes, we would definitely like to be involved with, helping this situation in a positive manner from every perspective. So
I'm just thinking that maybe it might be better to have Karen speak before the Open Space and Ecology Committee and then have them work on it and then bring it up to us,
Well, it
flesh
actually-
it out a little bit more.
it actually came before, I think it came to the police department first, because I know the police officers who are on night shift have noticed that we've got some really fat raccoons in Brisbane, in the main town Brisbane, and the raccoons out at Sierra Point are kind of skinny. We have, fat coyotes. This is a really anomalous situation that is, not normal. And why is it? It's because we've got, lots of these feral kitties that are fair game, but not only are the feral kitties now fair game, and very, very sadly, a lot of our domestic cats have become fair game, and I'm sure many of you know, a lot of our neighbors have lost their animals and small dogs, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
And then it's, you know what I'm
No,
saying.
It's a problem. I think
It's a
we
problem.
recognize
It's a big
that.
problem.
Yeah.
Can I make a comment,
Sure,
please?
Terry.
I went to the feral cat presentation that the police department and the rescue societies had, And then I also listened to the Open Space and Ecology Committee when they discussed the feral cats. And I think the help that we need to get it under control is to find volunteers in Brisbane that are willing to work on the problem, because it's a hands-on, feet on the ground issue that and an education process that we need to get people who are feeding cats because they're the strays that hang by their house, or they're feeding cats because they think it's a good thing. We need to get them involved with neutering the animals. And the committees and the people that have come and spoken don't have the time to do that. We need to get and find a way to reach out and get volunteers to be the point people for Brisbane. And so the Open Space and Ecology is trying to get that out through the STAR and other methods, but they were, I think, looking to getting if staff could be, who could be the point person to be in charge of this. And so I think that that's their main goal at this point, is to get some of the cat lovers in town that want to help with this, and get an organization of volunteers of Brisbane citizens.
Okay, so it sounds like a number of things are underway. We just need to bring them together and have the committee be active in this, and then when everything sort of gels, then come before the council and see what we can do.
Well, maybe perhaps Karen could be that point person. With
Well, let's wait and see, because we do have a committee that's I mean, they've been talking about, the Open Space and Ecology has been talking about this for a year, because they were talking about it when I was still on the committee. So I know that this is a concern of theirs. Barbara, do you want to weigh in?
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Just wanted to amend something Stuart said, and that is that we really, as Terry said, we are really looking for local volunteers to step forward, because I think it was like 3 women covered from like here to Palo Alto. It was just crazy. And I'm really glad that Karen's here tonight, because now I hear that and Michelle also hears, and Glenn maybe's watching too, that there are local people who are already interested and already aware. So that means our job has the potential, we actually have the potential to move forward with the council's blessing, and with that education and actually getting the boots on the ground.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah. So you all, work together and come back to us, and we'll go for it.
I think it's the best.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. Right. Thank you. Dana.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and congratulations. I have a different issue, which is about assistance to low-income people that I've raised a couple of times. I go back through my documents, and it was September 19th when I first raised the issue, and had thought that support to low-income people for issues with housing repairs had been part of the redevelopment agency. In October, I got a letter on city letterhead, but by a person that I don't believe is an employee of the city of Brisbane, Paul Scannell, who indicated that there wasn't anything among the obligations from the old redevelopment agency to deal with this issue. I initially inquired about were retaining walls, which had been on the agenda in a period of time back when, and it's a safety issue for the town, back when the city authorized the building of the retaining wall at Kings, near where it intersects with Humboldt. And so time's gone on, and there's yet other safety issues, and I mentioned that the purview of the issue, that and others, has not been among the ability of Rebuild Peninsula, and it may not be among the ability of the North Peninsula Community Services. And when I inquire how other communities have done it, I was told that community development block grants are what support the help to low-income people for the kinds of issues that I've raised. I noticed that tonight on the agenda, there's a report about some money going into kind of like a general, it's $1,400 to Heart, which when you read the entire report, that's 0.07% of this purported windfall of money that will be coming from your prudence. However, the last time I raised this question, the city manager said he was going to report back as to the programs that the city provides for low-income people. And while the money you have on the agenda is for a specific purpose of supporting people getting new housing, I still don't see anything that supports protecting the existing stock for existing low-income residents. And this is going on 4 months, and I would like to have a response. I've been told that for the one issue that we're having in our home, that the city of Pacifica handles it promptly, and partly because they were sued. And I don't want to have to get to that place, but I think while I'm speaking in my own self-interest, I believe that every time I speak, there are other people with similar situations that when they call the city and they say, do you have a program to assist me in my situation? And there's a person on the phone in the city who says, oh, no, we don't. And they just give up. And I'm not going to give up. And I would like to know, again, considering that you're thinking you're going to have a $2 million windfall, what services are you going to put back into the community? My family has managed to be able to pay our property tax of $7,000 this year, but can hardly put food on the plate in our home. And I don't think I'm the only person having this experience. And I come to the city with great humility to ask you to respond to my questions. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks. We used to have such a program, as I recall. It wasn't associated with redevelopment, though. And so I guess I'm asking if we could get some, sort of background information on what we used to have and what are the possibilities, not at this moment, of course, but just as a future agenda item. I do remember we had some kind of program. There was a program, Fred Smith was involved in it, and it was to help people with low income to repair their houses. Remember that?
Building together.
Yeah.
It is Rebuilding Together Peninsula, one of them at least. We can find out if there was more.
Yeah, but there were some others too.
It was originally called Christmas in April, but I think.
But that was one, but there were others too. So I was just wondering if we could get a update on where all that stands.
I'm sorry, I was speaking about the community block grant, not just giving $1,000 or $2,000 to an organization.
No, me too.
But thank you.
Yeah, no, that's what I was thinking of too. These were actually efforts to help people with, substantial maintenance issues. Because what's on the agenda tonight is just a membership, nothing to do with what you're talking about. Yeah, so I guess I'm just asking for if we could sort of find out where that's at and maybe in the future, unless you want to say something now.
No, I mean, we can, I'm not aware at the time that I've been here that we've had a program other than the one Sherry just
Yeah.
responded to. There are, historically, there have been block grant programs that
Right.
have done this, or done some form of projects of this nature, but I really don't know exactly what the status of those are, and
Right.
we're not an entitlement city, so.
Right.
But we can certainly look into that as well as whatever else may be out there. But the letter that she got, that Dana got and referred to was from Paul Scannell, who is the chairman of the Brisbane Oversight Board, and that's the reason
Right.
he signed that. And
Right.
and there, you know, there are no redevelopment funds as indicated in that
Right.
letter.
Right. Right. Okay.
Well, I agree. You know, it's something, you know, get some help for our citizens, you know,
Right.
that, you know, because we had the low and moderate income housing fund, which
Right.
was, you know, turned over, and that, you know, actually was utilized in numerous ways to help people get into homes.
Right.
But, you know, Dana's right. I mean, there are people that are still struggling and, you know, having difficulty in
Right.
repairs for their home and stuff, and
Right.
and maybe look at a way. I know we have some money that's probably going to be coming next year, but, you know, we may want to look at doing some kind of program or, you know, partnering on somehow with.
I mean, we will have some level of affordable housing funds.
Yeah.
So that's a possibility, and I think there's some other projects that that may be of great need in the community also. So we'll take a look at that and report back.
Okay.
Yeah, you know, and Dana, you know, she had mentioned, I guess, a program in Pacifica. If we can, you know, maybe look at what they're doing there. And I know that was hard for you, Dana, coming up here. I could hear in your voice, and I know you have a lot of pride. And you know, government should, if they can, do, you know, to help its citizens. And you know, you brought it to the table enough times where you should be able to get some kind of answer from us. So thank you for that.
I had one other question, Mr. Mayor, if I could. Dana, in regards to the retaining wall, I wasn't quite clear on the one on Kings and Humboldt. Could you clarify? Can you come? I just, Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to get some clarity on.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. There were 3 properties discussed at the same time, and our property was one of them. And what I had presented was that the 6% low-income housing funds that were available in the county were not available to us because the cost of the retaining wall exceeded the allotment that they could give out, and that because some of their money was funded by HUD, it required all safety conditions to be resolved under the grant that they gave. And since they couldn't resolve all safety conditions under $100,000, they were unable to help us.
I see.
So that was the context of that. And since then, we've had an additional issue, which in relationship to Pacifica has to do with sewer.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks for that clarification.
Thanks. Okay, any other oral communications? Michelle?
Pardon?
Oh, I was, but the next item, I thought. But,
Well, is it about the items on the consent calendar?
right.
So should I wait till you, or you?
well, I was just going to respond to your request and remove them, which I assume is what you'd like to do, right?
Well, not really. I just really want to make a comment about it. It seems, I read through it all,
Oh, okay.
and I'll go back and talk a little bit about one thing that's kind of personal, is that for the last 6 months, I've been doing 2 full-time jobs at my job because someone else, resigned. And we also lost headcount, 2 years ago at my employers, and we lost a third of the company. And so everyone took on extra duties. And when I read through this document, I know how hard our city staff works, and they take on extra duties. And part of this whole payment structure is about, remuneration for the extra duties. And it looks like we're going to save money because then we're just increasing people's positions. I just kind of question it because there's a work-life balance, and it seems like we had a short-term period where people had to do more work for the same pay, or they got extra pay to do this or whatever. But I'm kind of worried that we're really getting a little bit deep. We have less employees, paying the ones we have more, expecting them to do more, but in the same amount of time or more hours. And so I sat through all those budget meetings, and I guess I'm just questioning why we're increasing people's salaries.
Okay, so it seems to me, I don't know.
I kind of need some clarification.
We
on
might
it.
be better off just, taking this all off the consent calendar and asking the finance director to give or the city manager to give a short presentation of what this is all about, so that everybody knows what you're talking about.
Yeah, because I'm not questioning
and
it.
then we can vote for it. I think just one motion would carry the whole thing, I think, if we include everything. And right, Mr. Attorney? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, because I'm not questioning the value of our people at all. I think
Yeah,
they're
no, I
very
think
valuable.
it's,
Questioning the financial.
I got it. So
Okay, thank
why
you.
don't we get a little staff report, and then we can respond to your concerns.
I'll start, and then I'll have Stuart fill in behind me. I would, first of all, I want to say that this has been a very difficult process on a staff level, and a very arduous process. This has really been a 5-year reorganization, and as the speaker spoke to, we've lost a number of positions, and we've actually reduced our payroll by about $2.7 million. And we have been working with our employees and adjusting people as we have reduced staffing. And of course, it's a little bit of a learning process and a learning curve. As you lose people and you have people filling in different positions and stuff, you have to kind of start adjusting to kind of new realities and where you need people and what sort of expertise. So this conversation that we've had that leads us to tonight really kind of started at the council level last spring when we were looking at the budget. And I think the observation was made by our new mayor that there was a number of positions that had been reduced and that we're probably never going to fill those positions again. So that we ought to take a fresh look at the organizational chart and the skills and abilities and classifications that we need to be able to continue to operate the organization. And I would say that, and I've said this many times, and I'll say it again because I think it bears repeating, is that when we started on this process 5 years ago, we said at the time that we're going to try to reduce at the top levels where we possibly can, to try to save the people down below that are on the ground level providing various services, whether they be policemen or firemen or public works, maintenance workers, people working in parks. And that our goal was to not have a significant reduction in services, not to close facilities, not to shut down programs, but to be able to provide a level of services to the community that it had been receiving over these many, many years, if not decades. And I think for the large part, we've been successful at that. Not that there aren't issues, and we've been starting to go through some of those. So in looking at our employee organizational chart and the various skills and abilities of that we needed to kind of look forward to going forward, there were a number of adjustments, and we can go through those with you. But we really tried to take a very conservative and modest approach to that and only make those adjustments where we really felt it was necessary and it was fair to the employee. It's one thing to ask somebody to work out of class for a period of time. It's another thing to just say, well, that's going to be the permanent situation, because that frankly creates legal problems for you, and it also starts to encourage people to look to other opportunities if they don't think they're being treated fairly. So I think what you have before you tonight is the implementation of a plan that basically takes our current employee population count, has the classifications in place and the pay grades in place to be able to carry forward the level of services that we're currently providing to the community. As I've discussed with the council before, I think there are a couple areas that we need to look at augmenting in the next couple of years. We've already had a fairly extensive talk about public works maintenance issues out the marina and water and sewer. I do believe that there's some issues within the police department in terms of police officers, staffing, and a couple other places in the organization. Certainly, as the economy picks up, we're going to have a lot more applications before the planning department, and that's an area that we'll take a look at. Those are not in this plan at this point in time. So we're continuing to try to do what we do in terms of service levels with the current employee count. So with that said, you have a request before you tonight to approve a classification for a deputy finance director. Our person has been doing, has been in that lower position, has had to take on a number of additional duties in this past year, an extensive amount of duties having to do with the state's dissolution of the redevelopment agencies. She is a long-term employee of the city that frankly has allowed me as city manager to reorganize and use my finance director and a whole bunch of non-traditional finance director sorts of duties. I call him my deputy city manager, but we know when we hired him, he was a finance guy, and that's his core area of responsibility. But having a number two person behind him and a deputy finance director really allows him to be able to do all the Parks and Rec and open space and sustainability committee and all the other stuff. So that is that position. In the Human Resources Department, we have basically one person who does all of our personnel classification issues, our recruitments, our oversees our labor relations with our outside consultant, and we are in the last couple of years we've had her actually doing a lot of special project management in addition to the issues with the traditional issues with human resources. We're recommending recognizing that and increasing that to a principal analyst position. I think the other positions have to do with the out at the harbor. As you know, we had a position that was a department head, department level position that oversaw the marina as well as the community pool. That person is retired. We've taken that position and basically downgraded it just to a harbor master level, so that harbor master is going to be kind of a division head reporting to the public works director, and the full pool operation will be reporting to the finance director with his Parks and Recreation hat on. So that's item number 5. 6 and 7, I don't know if Stuart or Maria, if you want to speak to those. I'm sorry, did Maria?
Do you want me to take this?
Yeah, go ahead.
So the remaining 2 is we set up a program for assignment pay for additional duties where there was not a full complement of a position entailed, but to provide wages to compensate staff who took on additional duties on a limited basis. The general employees and the mid-management group had this provision in their contracts previously. However, when we did our last negotiations, this provision lapsed. So what we're doing is reinstating those provisions so that we can continue that on moving forward as necessary.
mean, I think just in closing, the whole reorganization over the last 4 to 5 years.
Talk about the commander?
Oh, I'm sorry, yes. The commander position, we had been filling on an interim basis with a sergeant, and that actually drove overtime because of the way you pay for a sergeant. We will now have a commander position, and we won't be subject to overtime with regards to that, or the bump up pay that we had for the sergeant. So that was just kind of recognizing that position. That is very important in terms of the chief's duties and the ability to go to meetings and having to do with the County Chiefs Association outside of Brisbane, and having a number 2 in command here at all times, and also being able to respond to emergency situations that may take place from time to time. So in just kind of in composite, I mean, the way I looked at this is that, you know, overall, I think we reduced the staffing levels to the tune of about 2.7 million. We're asking to add back in about 100,000, and then that will be the organization, notwithstanding these other issues that we've talked about in terms of what we may need to look at going into the future. And we'll look at those, I think, one-off systematically and evaluate the pros and cons of either doing it with city staff or doing it with contract work, or just how we'll approach that.
Yeah, I think it's an accurate history that the council has been discussing these matters for a while. And this really reflects changes, as you said, that have occurred over quite a few years. And this brings the whole organization kind of up to date and getting people properly classified and paid for what they're actually doing. So it seemed to make sense to the council, and I don't know whether they want to say anything more about that now, but at least in our past conversations, everyone seemed to feel that this was an appropriate way to go.
Yeah, if I may, you know, I think that, first of all, I think the private sector sucks sometimes, you know, to be quite honest with you, you know. And so, you know, these folks have, to me, I think if you're working the extra hours, you're doing the extra duties, you should be compensated properly. And like the mayor has said, we've been discussing this for quite some time, and you know, I think that it's about time that these changes have been made, and the compensation is, I think the compensation is justifiable. So I would move forward approving every item on the consent calendar.
What's the proper way to make the motion, Mr. Attorney?
I wanted to make comment too.
Yeah, okay, we'll just make the motion and then we can add more comments.
I think if you want, you can make a motion as long as you identify each individual resolution as part of the same motion.
Okay, you want to do that?
Well, it's under the consent calendar, right?
Yeah.
They approve the consent calendar.
Yes,
Okay, will that work?
Yeah.
Okay, so you've made that.
I'll make that motion.
Anybody want to second it?
I'll second it.
Okay, discussion?
Yeah. Actually, this and the way we worked out the staffing was to really eliminate some of the financial problems that we were having. We reduced staff, how many? We reduced almost, what, 22 or? We went from 100?
I think 22 positions, Maria? I think something in that neighborhood.
22 positions were by attrition or by just not filling, went off to the side. And what we did kept us solvent. And nobody's going to do anything for free. The employees assumed additional responsibility. They've done a superb job. We've been able to stay solvent. And the way we paid some of these salaries were on an additional pay that should tomorrow down the line, the work is taken and we've expanded the roles to other areas, those positions can be looked at. But this aligns what people are doing with the positions, with the salary schedule that we have. It just matched them together. And there's also it's helpful with the audit. You don't want to pay some people salary and the salary schedule does not reflect that. This aligns all of them together. So that's my statements.
Okay. Any other?
Yes.
Jerry?
Yes. I too work in the private industry, and things are very different. They keep asking more and more and more, and the benefits don't go up the same way. And the general consensus is, if you don't like it, find another job. And some people are in the position to be able to do that, and some aren't. I do believe that we've got a great staff, and I think that where a job is defined and they're doing a different job, I don't have a problem with reassigning their duties. I do have a concern that we look, I think it's good, I'll change tacks there for a second. I think it's very good that over the last several years, we have reduced staffing, because obviously, if we had 22 other people on staff, we were inflated and needed to do those reductions. And so it's good that we were able to do that, and it takes the cooperation of staff to do that. I'd like to know how many people in our organization are on special assignment pay. And I think that if we're changing their classifications so that we bring them into where their group is, and that takes them off the special assignment pay. But are we still having more people having special assignment pay on than not with the section 6 and 7? And when someone gets a special assignment that they're going to be doing something that wasn't normally part of their job description, they still have that 40-hour work week. They still have the time that, given their qualifications, they're being paid for. So I have a concern about everybody gets their pay structure, and then plus we're going to give some more, because it's hard to show that in our budget when almost everyone is on special pay assignment.
Could I get a response from staff?
Yeah, and I'll have Maria and Stuart can jump in here if I got this wrong, but I think in terms of the special pay, we had 2 current employees, and I think we will continue to have 2. It's just there will be one that will go off it and one that will go on to it. So there'll be two employees that'll be impacted.
So it's a small number of people that are on special assignment pay.
Right.
And that doesn't include their hours of work, increase their hours of expected work.
No, what it does is it gives them additional responsibilities and assignments and areas that they've got to be, the staff expert on. But it's not intended to increase people's hours per se. I think the reality is that sometimes it does, especially in areas where people are not hourly employees, which much of the staff is not. So, it's, I guess, kind of defies logic that you give people a bunch of new things to do and then expect that that's all going to happen in the same period of time.
Thank you.
Yeah. The special pay was given to the employees that were assuming really new responsibilities that they had to be trained.
Correct, and it was assignments that were really non-traditional with what their core job description and classification.
Correct. It was really additional duties. They needed to be trained, and they needed to invest even their own time to learn all these duties.
Right.
I'm one of the most restrict people about talking about just willy-nilly increasing salary schedule, or, I was I'm the one that was heading to have their health benefit contained. So I would have been the first to come back and say, hey, this is a joke. but this rightfully needs to be done.
Just to follow up in terms of kind of the history of where we were at with this, because I think the program's a couple of years old now. At the time, when I pitched this to the council gave me direction to go forward with it, and we said that we would have between 3 and 5. And we originally had 3 people. One of the individuals left the organization for another job. We reduced to 2. We didn't increase. So I think we've tried to be conservative with its application, but it's a way for us to be able to assign things and get the job done without incurring a lot of expense.
Right, and then we cut down travel and training expenses on the top of that.
Well, this
Learn
year
on
we
your
did.
way.
Yeah,
Learn on
this year we did. I mean,
Yeah.
I'll be proposing that we put that back into the budget into a large extent next year, because I think you can only go so far, so long,
Yes.
not putting training and travel in your budget.
Yes.
But
Clark?
Yeah. Michelle, I completely agree with you about the private sector. I mean, having spent all my career, there, that, I remember one particular job I had. I was a head of a department and lost 50% of my staff, and then took an immediate 10% cut in pay, and then had the additional duties of 2 other department heads who lost their jobs and at a reduced salary. And it got to a point that everything that would come wrong, they'd always say, here, what do you think about this? Let's have you do it. And it got to a point where it'd say, which job do you want me to do poorly? Because something's going to fail. And that's kind of what I'm concerned about with staff. I think this is, what we've been planning, and to proceed forward, of course, and that's why I seconded the motion. I'm particularly concerned with 3 areas, and one is the police department with leases. I think they're at critical mass. Fortunately, we do have a safe town and everything like that, but I know that we're just at bare minimum with our officers, and hopefully in the future that will, grow a little bit. I'm concerned in that area. I'm also concerned with our public works at some point, and I'm going to include the marina with that, because we do have a lot of capital projects, and Ray, you alluded it to in your acceptance speech for being mayor, that these are things we need to deal with, and just general maintenance. And I know we've been using contractors and, of course, overtime, for police department. So those are 2 areas of particular concern that I have, moving forward. I applaud, Clay, your management of the staff and their willingness to take these things on. And I think moving forward that we can, get to a better place and where we've been. And it's been tough, but I think we're getting there. Of course, we have been, I feel, pretty fiscal conservative from a sense that we haven't fallen off the edge. A lot of other cities, a few of them went into bankruptcy, but our colleagues in San Mateo County, the majority of them are really struggling. And, we've been able to ferret through this pretty well and still hold a very strong reserve. So with that, I'm extremely happy that we were pre-planning, and we were fortunate also. So, thank you.
Okay. Any other comments? Are we ready to vote?
Yes.
Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Okay, we move on to new business. And that has to do with the review process for looking at the Baylands Draft Environmental Impact Report. I guess, John, you're going to start us off on that?
Yes, thank you, Honorable Mayor, members of the council. Work is progressing on the Baylands Draft EIR, and we anticipate its publication in early 2013. The council spent a lot of time talking about the process, the determination of the 120-day comment period, the establishment of the Planning Commission as the sort of the body to host hearings on the draft EIR. And the theme the council has directed staff to date is really that our goal is to facilitate public involvement and participation in the EIR review process. And that's, the charge the council has given us. So I just wanted to give kind of a brief update. I think it's important that we get a lot of this information out front of the publication of the document, so there's an expectation of what's going to happen, how people can participate efficiently and effectively. So I just want to kind of highlight a few items. When we talk about pre-publication date, when we're closer to having that information, the idea of making sure we're using our city materials to almost on a save the date kind of basis, alert people that the document's going to be coming, remind them of what the function of the document is and what the expectation is through the EIR process. So again, just kind of to get it back on people's radar that it's ongoing and getting ready to occur. Then when the EIR is available, to make sure the notification to the community goes out real time so people don't lose part of the comment period, not knowing the document's available or whatever. So we're going to really work on ensuring that that notification and the availability of document occurs real time. Those are some of the steps are outlined in the staff report in front of you. A key element, obviously, is to present the draft EIR. And this was a conversation the Planning Commission had last Thursday evening at their meeting. And to help facilitate that, and he was also there on Thursday night's meeting, I'd like to introduce Lloyd Zola, who's the project director for the EIR. And he can kind of walk through some of the steps on how he proposes to present the information in the draft EIR to the community via the Planning Commission's hosted workshop. So that I'll introduce Lloyd Zola.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here. Congratulations to all of you. As an outcome, an outgrowth of the information meetings you've already had on generally what is the CEQA process, what is an EIR, and how we get public participation in the review of the actual document, and also following on your direction of informational meetings and then public comment on the EIR, what I've recommended, along with John, is a process of 4 informational meetings to present the environmental impact report, followed by, I had said 1 meeting, I should have known better in this community.
I saw that, I was like, I don't think so, Lloyd.
Right. A couple of meetings, couple being general, to take comments on the EIR. And the idea being the transition from what is generally an environmental impact report would go to this is what the Baylands EIR is. The first meeting focusing on this is the project, because even just trying to describe project on this becomes very complicated with a specific plan, the community plans, all the variations, differing levels of detail. In a project, analyzing all of that at equal level of detail. So we'll walk people through what to expect in that document. We'll also talk about at the beginning the land use section. And one of the key pieces of background is what does your general plan now permit on the Baylands? What kinds of uses? What level of intensity of development that could be compared to the proposals that are on the table? Because they're different. We'll also talk about alternatives, the alternatives that will be reviewed as part of the EIR, and how the community can use those alternatives as a way of evaluating the various project proposals, comparing them. That would be the start. We would then talk about traffic, air quality, greenhouse gas emissions, noise, basically the traffic related impacts, because those are going to be some of the largest ones that will result from the project. We would then talk about public services, facilities, what that means in terms of the proposals of the project in terms of water supply, your water and sewer systems, police services, fire services, schools, and how all those fit together. And then finally finishing with physical impacts, hazards, remediation of the site, biological impacts, and the other issues. From those 4 informational meetings, we would then start a second set of meetings to take comments on the draft document. The idea being in terms of timing, and this was one of the issues that the Planning Commission had, that the 4 informational meetings should be near the start of the public review period, but not right at the beginning. So the idea would be several weeks ahead of the release of the draft EIR would be, as John said, a save the date. The document will be available on this date. Be prepared. About 3 weeks later, we would start the series of informational meetings. That way the public would have some time to review the document when we would provide information. It's kind of a tightrope walk. As we're providing information, we don't want to rush them at the very beginning. Here's the document. No, you haven't had any time to review it. We'll just flood you with information. But at the same time, not give people time to review it, but not get so far into the process that there's not all the time to review it in light of the information we give. So the idea would be weeks 3 and 4, after about 3 weeks, to do these 4 informational sessions, group them as close together as possible. I looked at trying to do one night, going to be too much. So what we talked about was having 2 consecutive nights one week, 2 consecutive nights the next week, so we don't stretch out the information over a long period of time, take up the public review period, just giving information about what's there. The input meetings would then be later in the process, but still enough ahead of the end of the program. So somewhere around day 90 in the review period would be the public input meetings, giving people a time to comment on the document, and then the public time to actually review the transcripts of that meeting before the end of the public review period so they could comment on what they heard. We would also, in one of the issues the Planning Commission had, was first being very clear up front about the purpose of the informational meetings, and that they were basically to give information to the public, but also knowing in this community we've got to expect response. So talking about not just these are the informational meetings, here will be the other chances for the opportunities for public input. And so what we had talked about was actually providing at the very beginning with that first notice, here's when the EIR will come out, here is the series of meetings, have all the agendas ready so that we could tell the public at the beginning, this will be the series of meetings that will be going through during the public review period, and they'll be able to see the agenda. We could talk about even, the concept was at the informational meetings, those would be, the public record that comes out of that would be the written documentation given to the public, as opposed to the questions the public would ask. How does this work? What should I look for? How did you evaluate these things? But then come back in those second set of meetings, which should be the comment meeting, have a court reporter there so that all the comments would become part of the written record. One of the things that we need to be careful of in CEQA is, although CEQA really emphasizes public input into the process, it also is very much written documentation, written responses to written comments. So even though we would have a public meeting and take verbal comment, what we are required to do under CEQA is take those written comments, put them into writing. That's why having a court reporter is so nice. And then respond to each of the comments that are made so that when the Planning Commission reviews the final EIR, the draft plus comments plus responses, they're all there. In addition to the letters would be that series of meetings. The other comments of the Planning Commission were, although they will be the hosts of this, we wanted to make very clear to the public when they are in front of the Planning Commission that the Commission will not be responding to those comments. They are the host. This is not a public hearing in the traditional sense, and they're not going to be responding, and that will be difficult. As you know, sitting on the dais, people making comments, it's difficult not to respond, but that will be one of the things that we'll need to do to make sure, because even as commissioners, if they do respond, now I've got not only the public comment to respond to, but the commissioner's comment to respond to, and trying to separate that out becomes a little bit confusing. So that is the recommendation, and I'll kind of summarize the process. So somewhere early in the beginning of the year, we would do a save the date set of notices that would identify the date of release of the draft EIR, lay out the 4 informational meetings and their purpose, their structure, what will be part of the record, what won't. Those informational meetings held about after 3 weeks after the draft EIR, so weeks, and I said this wrong at the Planning Commission, 3 weeks afterwards is week 4 and 5. I said week 3 and 4, but weeks 4 and 5 of the 120-day period, somewhere around day 90, about a month before the end, we would hold a couple, and we'll need to define. I know if we say 2 to start with, we may need more. I mean, whatever. One thing I've learned is however many we say we're going to need, we'll end up needing more. But those meetings to take public comment about day 90, leaving a month to the end of that 120-day review period, so we have time for people to review their comments and the proceedings of those meetings. With the close of the public review period, we would then take all the written comments, the public comments at those meetings, and then start responding to them. That then will all get put together for the final EIR, and then would actually start the debate and discussion of the project itself. And what we would do in that initial set of description of the system, we would lay out not only this process, but where the actual public debate over the project itself comes, because we want to make very clear the review of the draft EIR is the review of information and analysis of the project, not is the project good or bad. What we'll be looking at through this period, do we have the information we need to make decisions? Is the information we have in front of us adequate, complete, accurate, as opposed to is the project good or bad? That's the whole debate that starts after the final EIR exists. So with that, if there's any questions, I'd be glad to take them.
I do, but I'll
I have
let
one.
someone ask first.
I have one quick question. If, and maybe this is to Hal and or a combination to Hal and Lloyd. If in that 90-day process, we get where we want to start taking comments and stuff like that, and when we find out that, gee, we really didn't have enough time to collect this data, do we have the ability to extend that out, the 120 days?
Knowing there's a city attorney right over there, I know I can give my planner answer.
Okay.
But my planner answer is yes.
I would
We have that ability, but.
Yeah, I would concur.
Okay. That's.
Some questions. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So what you talked about that the Planning Commission is the host, and as I was reading the staff report, it's interesting to know that the public hearings are they're not formal public hearings. So it was interesting, to kind of understand the logistics of it all. So now, we'll have meetings. The Open Space and Ecology Committee will have meetings. Park and Recreation, they will have meetings. They're not formal. Either the public comments that they'll give at with those two bodies will not be part of the public record, but if they write their comments and they give them to these bodies, then they do become part of the public record. But if you give a verbal comment at the Planning Commission meeting, that will be part of the formal comments.
Correct. Right. There will be the meetings hosted by the Planning Commission for the express purpose of taking comments on the draft EIR. And I think what the attorneys will often say is, while we can distinguish between what is a comment on the draft EIR made inadvertently at a public meeting on the project and what is not, the safer route is respond to everything that ends up on a set of minutes anywhere.
Okay.
Yeah, and if I could jump in to elaborate on that, you'll find a lot of responses saying this relates to the merits of the project and not the EIR, but It's going to be difficult for the public to make that distinction, but the fact of the matter is that at council direction, the EIR is being referred out to a number of bodies, open space, park and rec, and the like. What you are asking is for them to provide their comments, not to conduct their own public hearing.
Yeah.
So it'll be incumbent upon the chairs of each of those groups, if anyone does show up, although they're public meetings, to say, well, if you have a comment on the EIR, the place to make that is to the Planning Commission, because there will be no response to your comments here. The only thing that will actually go in the record would be the comments or opinions or recommendation of the advisory body that you have sent the EIR to for their reaction, not comments made to that body by members of the public. So it's going to be a difficult distinction to maintain, but otherwise the administrative record would become an absolute nightmare. And I think the only way that the EIR consultant can respond to comments is by having those comments focused into the Planning Commission, including comments from other advisory bodies. And if anything you want to elaborate on that.
All right. And but yeah, and in regards to presenting the draft EIR, it states that CEQA does not require public meetings or public hearings on the draft EIR. So this is something that the city is taking on because it is.
Yeah, I don't know of any city that reviews an EIR without conducting what they would call a public hearing, but the reality is that CEQA as such does not require a public hearing. It requires an opportunity for public comment. Theoretically, those comments could all be in writing. Now, nobody actually does that, I don't think. But the hearings that are conducted are basically hearings or meetings, I should say, to allow the public an opportunity to give verbal comments. You can call it a public hearing, but it's really, in a technical sense, it's really not. It's an opportunity for public to make verbal comment, and the public can just as easily submit written comments, which in some respects are preferred because then you don't have to worry about whether the court reporter got it down accurately. You've got something in writing. It's a whole lot easier to respond to a written comment than it is someone making a comment at the meeting, but the reality is that that's going to be a good part of the responses here.
Okay. And then, Hal, in your letter, September 10th, in item A, and Lloyd, you talked a little bit about it in regards to feedback from the commissioners in the process, and you give some reasons why it's not a good idea to do that. And so, Hal, if you could just kind of explain to the audience why you believe that's good advice.
Well, there will be an opportunity for the commission as a commission to give a response and its opinion on the EIR. But at this stage of the process, that is not the time. I think the whole theory here is that we want to receive all of the public comments, and then there would be a response. Then the commission will have its shot at the EIR. It's kind of like, in physics, the uncertainty principle, whereas if you try to study something and you look at it, and by looking at it, you've affected what it looks like. And in a way, this is similar to that, because the commission is a decision-making body. And if the commission starts giving its opinion on the EIR and weighs in on what it thinks are deficiencies or whatever, our concern is that those comments by themselves are going to influence the public comment. And I think we want to keep kind of a purity in receiving comments from the public without those comments being influenced by the decision maker, so to speak, and for the same reason that would apply to the council as well. So I think the order of things is you get it out there, you get all the public comments, and that's the public's own reaction, uninfluenced by public officials or the Planning Commission, City Council, and then the Commission can really take those comments into account in evaluating making its own evaluation of the EIR. And it could be that some of the comments from the public are the same comments commissioners would have made, but then they can simply say, well, the public has already addressed some of those issues.
Sure, and that makes sense, because then you want to portray a level of neutrality as the information is coming in, so that you do not taint the feedback, the comments that would come from the community. Okay. Those are my questions.
Good,
Mr. Mayor.
thank you. Anybody else?
I do have a question. Looking at the documents that you prepared, Hal, and that are in the staff report that John and Clay prepared, I am confused, and this is specifically, I am part of the BBCAG, and they will be making comments. How does that affect, do I just have to sit and listen, or should I not listen? Or can I make a comment as a as a private citizen?
Yeah.
Or do I not comment because this is coming before me? Can
2 and
we
4.
listen to these on television? Or is that tainting our neutrality? Where are my hands tied, and how far behind my back?
Good question.
I would never recommend that anybody should sit in a group and not listen. But I think that's the starting point. And it's always nice when the attorney says, "You start," so I can correct you afterwards. That's good. But there are a series of committees, and you are, in my understanding, actually sitting on a committee making a recommendation to yourself, as I think where part of that confusion is coming from. So, but I think in terms of making sure that any comments you make in that group are related to the draft EIR, you're making your comments at that point as an individual citizen member of that committee, but the comments that come out are not yours, they are the committee's. And that's one of the pieces we'll need to make sure.
So I shouldn't author anything?
Probably safer.
Terry, I've thought about that one, and that's what I come up with, is that we'll go along with it with the committee, because I'm on that committee also, and that,
It's only common sense, really.
But Clark, you're a representative of the council, and you're a representative of the community, right?
No,
Are you both,
we're both
council.
council.
Okay, okay.
And then we have staff that sits on that also.
yeah, I mean. yeah,
And we have planning commissioners that are on that committee.
No, it's
And
gonna be-
other people on that are on the open space and
there'll be.
and ecology.
There'll be more than that. There'll be at least 3 that,
Well, no, it's not just speaking. I would, and what the metaphor that comes to mind is imagine a general plan committee where you have members of the planning commission, members of the city council, members of other committees and commissions sitting there as a review body making a recommendation to the whole. And in that metaphor, you are working as a group to make a recommendation to the larger body. And I think, given that metaphor, it's a little bit more comfortable in doing that. So I would think in terms of those kinds of review committees, and then provide the comments in that manner. You're not doing it in your official capacity, but you are representing the range of decision-making that's there. Does that, there's caucus going on.
Yeah, the caucus going on, right? Because this is a complicated issue.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a very complicated issue.
No, it is.
And when it's complicated enough that we don't even know what we are truly allowed to do, or how we're allowed to
do it,
respond, it makes it even, when you don't know the ground rules, or you don't know where your limitations are, it's harder to live within those limitations. It's like not knowing your budget and going to the grocery store. It makes it much more difficult.
So one of the things that we can do is I'll work with John and city attorney, and what we can do is essentially put together rules of the game, for lack of a, but the basic guidelines for each of these committees, and use those kinds of metaphors as to what should and should not be done, what can and cannot be done with all the various groups, because there will be comments coming from a lot of different places.
Just so you know, Lloyd, John's on that committee too.
Well, then he doesn't comment on what the committee is. But we'll put that together so that as we walk into this process, each group, we can define how all these various pieces fit together, because we're kind of finding all the pieces in at the same time.
Right. Yeah. The interesting thing, if we would have come back and say, oh, forget about BBCAG, a lot of people would have been upset. But when you're working things out, it really starts working itself off. So, for example, if you're going to be making comments on the city council, your role at the BBCAG is going to be definitely more compromised and limited. So it works itself off as we go through the process, rather than just saying, oh, BBCAG we don't need to get input, because now you realize that maybe that might be necessary because your role.
I'm not quite sure I understand that, but.
Means you're best not to do anything in that group because you're going to be making comments as a council.
Well, that's.
But advisory is what he's talking about.
But if that were the case, we have members who are on BBCAG and Open Space, we have Planning Commission members who are on BBCAG, and at this point, all of our groups would be mute. And we wouldn't be getting
that would not
information
be the case.
if what you're saying is
No, you're talking about planning commissioners are in that group, council representatives are in there, open space are over there, but every one of them are going to have individually within their group, they're going to have opportunity for input.
If planning director would like to weigh in.
There we go.
Just if I could, I would suggest that.
No, let planning director first, and then you're next. Sorry. Yeah, right.
I might suggest that the city attorney, like he did for the planning commission, in terms of their role in the draft EIR review, which I think was very non-intuitive to the commission up front too, because they assumed it would be kind of a regular hearing process. So maybe the city attorney could provide guidance to members of the BBCAG in particular. In my mind, there's probably two hierarchies. There's one, planning commissioners and city council members who have a very formal role in the final EIR process, very maybe different than an advisory body that, their scope is going to be limited in their advisory capacity on the draft EIR, so they may not be encumbered by the same way because they're not going to have a legal obligation to make findings on the final EIR. So that would just be something I'd throw out there, but the city attorney would need to verify that. And, I'll leave it up to Hal if he's comfortable providing that sort of guidance.
Yeah, I think what we need to do is have a meeting with all of us and put together some guidelines. I agree with John's comments as well, and also with Lloyd's, that we need some guidelines so that people know, what they can or possibly cannot do. But I agree, there is a distinction between the Planning Commission and the other groups, because the commission is part of the formal process. The others are sort of added in by the council as additional resources, but not as part of the formal decision-making process to the extent of making recommendations, which by law have to be considered by the council. So I think the input is at various levels, and the advisory bodies can make their comments to the Planning Commission, and the commission at its time would make a formal recommendation to the city council, which would include the EIR.
Right.
So just a clarification, on your staff report, it says all city representatives serving on the CCAG are advised to ensure that any participation in the BBCAG DEIR review process does not conflict with their formal legal responsibilities in the overall EIR process. So is that CCAG reference really supposed to be BBCAG?
It should be BBCAG, and I guess to be more clear, formal legal responsibilities in the city's EIR process. So the formal EIR process that the city undertakes, that would have been more clear language. And yeah, CAG and BBCAG are used interchangeably through that report.
Okay.
But I think what that illustrates is we need a better roadmap, so you know.
I truly believe that, and
Right.
and I would like to know my limitations personally, because it's always good to be in the know, as far as watching other meetings, getting other information once the EIR comes out, that the draft EIR comes out. And then as a general question, at the Open Space and Ecology meeting last week, they were given a fairly firm date that this was coming out in 3 weeks or 4 weeks. And I would be surprised that they would be getting more timely information than the council is, because I have not heard a firm date given to me in council.
A firm date for publication of the draft?
Yes.
Certainly, we don't have that firm date right now. Mr. Zola probably has as good a date as any. I think the date we've been talking about is the end of January. Is that fair, Lloyd, in terms of where we are in the review? But I mean, it's a tentative date at this particular point in time.
Okay, and that's a later date than what was given at the Open Space and Ecology Committee last week. So I know it's a moving target, but when Mr. Zola is talking about giving people 3 or 4 weeks lead time to save the date, that date, per what I heard listening in on another meeting, would already be expiring. So I want to make sure that the council is kept informed of that date before other just as important committees and groups are made informed of that date.
Okay.
You'll be the first to know.
Okay, Carolyn, Planning Commissioner?
I also am very concerned about the BBCAG because so many of us are city officials, or we're on commissions or on the council, that, you know, what should be the role that we can take within the BBCAG. I think we need a lot of guidance. I'm currently the secretary. I'd like to continue as the secretary and take notes, and I learn a lot by being the secretary. And but I feel that the BBCAG is a very important group that's going to be looking at the documents. My understanding is I can look at them, and as a private citizen, I can make comments. But you know, and so I think I feel very strongly that we do need to have the city attorney talk to the BBCAG, because so many of us are, you know, in government here. And, you know, and it's such an important group.
Carolyn, do you know the date of the next BBCAG meeting?
I honestly don't know. I don't remember.
Perhaps we could get that and schedule, if the city attorney's available to attend that, to give us a reference, if that's possible for the January meeting, or if that meeting's already booked up. I apologize, I was not at that meeting because of a conflict.
Yeah, I really don't remember the date. So I'll get back to the staff, I guess.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Carolyn. I think I know this person coming up next.
For the record, it's Anja Miller, Mr. Mayor. I have just a request for minor clarification, and then a comment on presentations. The clarification, I heard that the Open Space Committee would not, if a person comes and talks about the EIR to the Open Space Committee, that would not be a formal public comment that would be recorded. However, isn't a public person allowed to speak to the Open Space Committee for their benefit, so that then perhaps influence them in their deliberations as they make their comment? So I just want to make sure that people are not discouraged from speaking to the Open Space Committee. The second thought I had was I don't understand why when the EIR comes out, say February 1st, that there'll be a 3-week wait before it's introduced to the people. So people have time to, I understand, to look at it. But I don't think people want to know how to look at it. And that's what the introduction should provide for them. And I think it should come as soon as possible after the release. But that's when it should be talked about. It should be presented by the people who wrote it and have the initial dumb questions answered, maybe. Now, he doesn't want to answer any questions at that point, and I understand that too. It is complicated, but people will have questions. And so that too, you have to figure out where are people going to get their questions answered. And I do think that, like the BBCAG, who is really an advisory body to the state, as you know, it's a state body, and in that sense comparable to other state bodies. And the Open Space Committee and the Park and Rec, I think they should have at least staff available to answer people's questions as they talk to the commissions or committees to help them make their comment. You follow me?
Yeah, I do.
So I hope that those meetings are at no more than 1 week after the release, not 3 weeks, certainly. It's too long. That you're wasting time of the comment time. 1 month is gone already before they're even done introducing the thing. And you got 3 months. So I think up front you have to tighten up. And because you may need more time. That's how I see it. And having volunteered for the Citizens Committee, I haven't heard any guidelines for that group. I'd like to hear that too.
Next item on the agenda. Okay. Any other? I had a question. I just wanted a clarification from, I guess, whomever. And that has to do with the steps involving the final environmental impact report. And I want to just make sure that I got this right. Because as I said in my earlier comments, you've probably heard that it includes the draft, the comments and questions, and then the responses. And then that is then basically a proposed final environmental impact report that first goes to the Planning Commission, and then they review it and they can make, I guess my question is, do they have to accept that document and say, okay, we either recommend it for certification or we don't, and certification is adequate? Or can the Planning Commission say, there's some things here that are not complete yet, and we want you to go back and do that before we make our recommendation to the council? Can they do that?
Every city's rules are different. I've seen exactly that a planning commission, in making their recommendation on certification of a final EIR, will send it back to staff, back to the consultant to revise some of the responses to comments, and may or may not agree with proposed revisions to the draft EIR that are included in that final. So I've seen planning commissions include that in their recommendations, either to send it back or to say, we recommend certification of the document with the following provisos. This response should be changed in such and such manner. This response should be changed in such and such manner, even if they don't have the exact wording. It would be very similar to, and again, with the attorney back behind me to my right, the kind of recommendation they might make on conditions of approval on a project. That we would recommend approval of this with these changes. I've seen planning commissions do exactly that on final EIRs.
Okay, and that suggests then that when it gets to the council from the Planning Commission, they could do a similar thing.
Correct. Right.
How, in your experience, how often does that happen? Or is this typical or what?
I think we have a project in front of us that is not going to be typical in any way. But on large, complex projects, it is not unusual for a planning commission to ask for revisions to the final EIR, nor would it be uncommon for a council to say, we want to see these changes in the EIR before we certify it. The other issue that goes on and becomes part of the question that both the Planning Commission and you will face is how do you coordinate review of the project itself with the review of the final EIR? Many communities will hold the public hearing on the project at the same time as certification of the EIR and may say, we want these changes to the project before we certify anything. Others will move forward with the EIR to certification separate, and they'll certify it, then hold public hearings on the project. So that becomes part of the discussion that this community will need to answer. How will you either hold those hearings concurrently, that review concurrently project and EIR, or to what degree will you separate the EIR from the project? The advantage of holding them together is the final EIR can then aim right at what action you would take on approving or not approving a project. The issue of separating them and not holding the project approval is then what do you do? I've seen in one city they certified the final EIR, then went to hold the public hearing on the project, and unfortunately council made the comment, nope, you can't talk about the EIR. It's already been certified, done, finished, over with. Therefore, we won't hear that. And lo and behold, the EIR got overturned. So you need to be a little bit careful when you do separate them on keeping your hearings open. And I guess the other question becomes, if you've already certified the EIR, what good is a public hearing to take comments on an EIR? So that will be part of what we get to that process.
So that's
the final EIR.
set of decisions that we have to make. Because as we've been told on a number of occasions, we're not likely to be picking any one of the alternative scenarios that you're studying. We're probably going to be putting together, we meaning the community process, the Planning Commission and the council and all the people involved, some kind of mixture of things, which is going to be a creative solution, hopefully. And that's going to be pretty hard to do before you certify the final environmental impact report, because it seems to me that that process itself could take, months and months and months.
And kind of anticipating where we're going to be in the process, but one of the options you actually have at that point would be to say, and I've seen this, we would like to approve a project along the lines of A, B, C, and D. And now what we want you to go do is look at the EIR, look at the analyses. Can that EIR with the alternatives and scenarios that are in there support where we might go with that project?
So in that sequence, then you wouldn't certify the final environmental impact report until you have a sense of what it is we want to do.
Right, and sometimes what happens is where you may want to go is far enough afield or far enough different from the scenarios, alternatives, that you actually direct recirculation of a draft EIR on a different project description.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, if I may, what about is there a time frame once once you gather that information for the EIR, and I'm not sure if it would be recommended from the Planning Commission to be certified, but then does the council have a certain time period to certify the EIR?
There are time frames in CEQA, but I can't really think of a process that stretched out so long that became an issue in the adequacy.
Yeah, there's a reference to 1 year in there, but I think, the reality is that you're going to take whatever time you need, especially on a project of this magnitude.
Yeah.
And I think if you certified it too early and then you've got all these variables, and Lloyd can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's easier to modify an EIR that's still being worked on and has not yet certified, rather than you've hit a completion point, then you change the project. Then from a CEQA point of view, well, what's your next document?
Yeah.
Do you have to do an addendum? Do you have to do a supplement to the EIR? You're talking about a different document because the first one is done. Whereas if you're still working on it, you may indeed have an issue of recirculation, but you're recirculating a draft EIR, and it might be a little easier to deal with it in that regard. I don't know, maybe not.
No, that makes
Is that recirculation, is that like another NOP?
Well, it's not an NOP. It would just be sent out to other agencies for comment, and you give more public comment.
But again, like an NOP has to go back out for public, or for agency comment. If it wasn't certified and you changed the EIR, you'd recirculate it.
Well, it's a matter of degree. I mean, the likelihood is there are going to be some changes in language or whatever, but if you had a totally different project, I mean, it's going to become a matter of analysis depending on the facts and circumstances. But if you did a material change in the project to the point where you had to do a different environmental analysis, then you get into an issue of, is that different from your original draft to the point where you have to open it up to public comment all over again?
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with Ray in that I think what eventually comes out will be nothing like what we see before us today. A combination of all three, and then something else that is added to it. And so that makes sense to move the EIR process along, but not to finalize it until we get a better grip on what we eventually want to stand behind.
Right. So I think we need to give thank you very much, but we need to sort of decide whether we want to accept this approach that's been recommended to us, or do we want to make any modifications? There was, one suggested modification of, having the information meeting sooner rather than later.
Oh yeah, that's right. So Anya's comment was about the 3-week period, and she was thinking that it should come out sooner. But of course, we also have the opportunity to expand it too. So it isn't like that the clock is ticking and you got to do it now, or the door is going to shut. So
I think doing it originally when I had perceived that some time period, I was thinking 1 to 2 weeks. 1 week would be fine. And the only concern I had was not, wherever we do this, we're going to take some degree of criticism. If we go too early,
it's hard to coordinate times. You have these bodies, and it's like, okay, you got to.
And I think if we had the draft EIR released on a Monday to hold the first meeting, the middle of the next week should work. I think 3 weeks started getting a little bit long.
Okay.
Once the document is ready from your point of view and ready from staff's point of view to release, is there a problem with holding it for 3 weeks to be able to get the public notices out before it's released, so that we don't have this, let's schedule some meetings before we know it's done? It seems that, we've been waiting several years for this to get done, and now that it's ticking down to the last final seconds, we're all on pins and needles going, oh my God, it's going to happen today or tomorrow or the next day. And I don't see where that, unless there's a legal reason that we're delaying it from the developer or through the attorney, that I don't see where the jaw-breaking, time-critical mass is on, if we know it can be done by the 31st, wait until it's done on the 31st and then release it 3 weeks later when people can actually have scheduled it and plan for it.
Yeah, there's not any issue I know of waiting that time, other than they're hiding something. But what we would do is when we know dates certain, as soon as we know a date certain we can commit to, then it would be prudent to come back to council with that date and start that schedule. But as opposed to, now the document's ready, it's printed, now we'll first advertise. I think we'll know a couple weeks ahead of time when that date will be, so we won't have to hold that the entire time.
So the clock starts ticking exactly when, is maybe getting to Terry's question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, why is it critical that the day it gets submitted by you or approved by the city as ready, that, we hit the timer button and go,
oh, it's not critical from that standpoint, so.
Okay, because that's the impression I've been getting from that.
We can do this like a Apple product release. Let people know that 3 weeks on Monday morning at 9 o'clock, it'll be ready for release.
Have a line around City Hall.
Line around the block, yeah.
The date.
How much are we selling these for?
Once we know that's the date, because we've been getting.
We'll see. We'll see how long the lines are.
Yeah. So, yeah, we could commit once we know date certain, and as soon as we know date certain, we would identify that date. And if we don't know that date certain until 1 week ahead of time, then we would hold it so we can give that 3 weeks' notice.
Okay. All right.
And this is not an action item, it's just to give input.
Well, I think we have.
Yeah, I think we have, and we're going to look at the BB-CAG issue.
We have,
Right.
well, I guess we could, wait until the next meeting but I get the sense that it's kind of a consensus that the council is generally
Yeah, they're in
pleased
favor
with,
of,
with
yeah.
the proposal.
Yes.
So
I'm generally pleased with it as long as we have.
we have a couple of loose ends, let's say.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right, and that's
Yeah.
the feedback, I think,
Right.
to tie up.
Right.
Is there a chance we can take 5?
Beg pardon?
Can we take 5?
Take 5. That
Okay.
means you're ready to continue to 11 afterwards, huh?
10:25, oh boy.
Yeah, I mean, we'll continue on, but I'm working under pressure.
Yeah, okay. So let's take 5 and we'll come back.